About that. Okay, time for our featured speaker tonight. Comes by way of a suggestion from Mike Teddy, our former vice president, Jim Seagrave Daly, known as the local history geek. You can look him up on the localhistorygeek.com. And as you will be able to tell by his extreme level of intelligence, he's a fellow Penn State alum. Um, Penn State, you got it. We got one. Come on, I know there's more out there. Um, His family connections go all the way back to the American Revolution, Civil War, and World War One. He's presented to history societies and associations, libraries, and civic associations for the past 15 years from coast to coast. Among many things, he's a member of America 250 Delco, American Battlefield Trust, American Friends of Lafayette, Radnor Township Historical Society is where I think he knows Mike from, and he is a docent at the Union League of Philadelphia. So I'll give everyone see if you could pick out which one is Jim. Please welcome Jim Seagrave Daly.
There are not a lot of places I can wear this and get clats. So
Get this ready for.
thank you.
There you go.
Great. Thank
I
you
just
so
hit the
much.
up and down. And
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So as Vince said, and thank you first to Mike. Mike's going to hear another round of dumb jokes tonight that he heard about a month ago when I first gave this presentation. But thanks to Mike, thanks to Vince, thanks for all of you for being here. But more importantly, thanks for what you do every day out in the city, because it's so important to make sure that we are informing people properly about our history. So thank you so much. When my wife learned who I was speaking to tonight, she said, "You have found your people." So this is good stuff. I have notes just to keep me on focus here. I'm the ninth of 11 kids, so my focus was all over growing up. I never got the opportunity to talk, so this is truly like a dream come true. I'll take questions at the end. It might be easier. Unless something really jumps out, you can stop me, but talk for about half hour, 45 minutes, and then we'll take some questions. Yes. Okay, will do. Will do. So are you going to be changing the slides or am I? Awesome. Okay, so we're good here for now. So this is a statue of Thomas Paine in Bordentown, New Jersey. Oh, you got it? Sure. Okay. Excellent. There's also there's one of him in Morristown, New Jersey. There's one in Thetford, England, where he was born. Amazingly, there's not one of him in Washington, D.C. You would think in Statuary Hall in the Capitol, you would think somewhere surrounding the Capitol, nowhere. Unsurprisingly, funding for a statue was approved in 2022. It has yet to be decided where it's going to be placed. So, right, exactly. That's an entirely different talk. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So what we're going to do, Stephen, if you could hit the next one. So, I hit it too here to see. Beautiful. Okay. I'm not technologically sound. So, very important quote by John Adams. John Adams, known as the Atlas of Independence. Very important man. If you ask John Adams how important he was during the Revolution, he would tell you, right? But truly, you could see here, without the pen of the author of Common Sense, the sword of Washington would have been raised in vain. Thomas Paine is absolutely vital, as you all know, to our history. Without him, the grassroots movement and support of the colonists is probably not there. And we know, there are historians believe that the breakdown of patriots, loyalists, and those who were apathetic or basically sticking their finger up to see how the wind was blowing during the revolution was a third, a third, a third, right? And that last third, those sticking their finger up, whoever won the last battle, that's who they're rooting for, right? So Paine just plays such an incredible role here. Paine is born in February of 1737. Next slide, sorry. In Norfolk, in Great Britain. He spends much of his time with his father. His father is a staymaker for sales, okay? And it's something that follows Paine almost as an insult the rest of his life. Paine, growing up, doesn't have a lot of education. His parents are poor. His mother is Anglican, his father is Quaker. So he's got a mixed background from religious beliefs. When we talk later about the age of reason and the rights of man, Thomas Paine goes off against religion. But at this point, a lot of his education, he's self-taught. He's reading, he has education up through grammar school, and then he's got to help his father because they have no money, okay? Paine then, through his young adulthood, is not successful at anything that he does. Failure, loses money, is in debt. And again, he doesn't come from a wealthy family. So he's already kind of behind the eight ball when all this happens. He learns a lot from reading the Bible, which is ironic based on his stance with organized religion later on in life. He is a privateer. He's a school teacher. He's a customs officer. He was actually a lousy customs officer, similar to Sam Adams as a tax collector, which is ironic as all get out, right? But same thing. He wasn't very good on collecting excise taxes, so he didn't last very long. He actually crisscrosses Great Britain looking for a career. He ends up in Lewis in the UK. Near the coast, and that's where he starts writing about politics. And where he first focuses his venom is probably too strong of a word, but a target of his first writings is the republicanism in Lewis itself. So he takes shots at them. And of course, at the time, it's seen as being very radical, relatively speaking, right? Some of his early influences, I could have just put a plain picture of Ben Franklin on here, but again, kind of sort of knowing my people here, I thought this would be a good one. That's absolutely influenced me in my life. I was already a big fan of Ben Franklin, but seeing this quote makes me happier. Isaac Newton is a big influence of his. So men of science are big names for him. And again, there are things later on in his life that we're going to talk about, engineering and those sorts of things that he dabbles in and is successful in, but he points back to Franklin and to Isaac Newton. Of course, Ben Franklin at the time, arguably the most famous man in the world, right? Because of his experiments, because of his travel, and he spends most of his time in England. His wife, Deborah Reed, is here, and wife loosely, right? It's more of a common law marriage. He spends more time away from her than with her, right? She dies when he's in England. Like, it's just a very unusual relationship. I think it's one that my wife is jealous of and wish that we could mirror, quite frankly. I did. Yeah, without the pen of common sense. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I will read the quote. I'm sorry. Beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. So, and this picture is actually hanging in the Black Powder Tavern out in Chesterbrook, right on the edge of Valley Forge Park. Oh, it's absolutely true. Are you kidding me? Like, and again, I'm sure, and I don't want to make judgments. I'm sure it's some of those who clapped as I walked up seeing my jacket are not drinking Diet Cokes. So that's okay if you are, but no, it's beer absolutely is it. Yes. Was it? Okay. All right. Gotcha. So, it all gets in the same place, right? So it's Franklin who meets with Paine in London, and Paine says, I'm having a really tough time, can't get anywhere. Ben Franklin says, let me write you a letter of introduction. There is no better person in the world to write you a letter of introduction. Family, and not really connection to this, but my grandfather, so this is what you get when I talk. I go down rabbit holes. See, I'm not reading my notes. My grandfather was the oldest from a very wealthy family in England. He went to Oxford. He went, on and on and on and on. The Don of Oxford wrote him a letter of introduction when he came over to America before his parents had set up his arranged marriage. Said, if you, go to America, have fun, come back, and you're going to marry Mary, and you get the whole shooting match. He came and he met my grandmother, told my great-grandparents, and they said, if you marry her, you get nothing. So he marries, thank God, he marries my grandmother, gets written out of the will, is almost disowned. The only time they come and see him, they're living in London. His father has died, so my great-grandmother is still alive. She comes over from London during the Blitz to live with the son she disowned and the woman she did not want him to marry. My grandmother's lines, great lady, greatest woman I've known. My mother too. 5 sisters. Anyway, my grandmother said, I wasn't good enough for your grandfather until Hitler came along. So you see what letters of introduction can do. I actually have the letter of introduction framed in my house that is really, really cool. And I shudder to think who would write one for me in similar circumstances. So I'm glad we did not have to go that route. So it's 1774 when Paine gets the letter of introduction from Franklin. And think of everything that's going on in the colonies at that time, right? Second Continental Congress has met. You've got the Boston Tea Party is behind us, right? Franklin at that point has suffered through the cockpit, right? And what happens? That's January of 74. So Paine hops on a boat, comes over, almost dies on the way over, gets typhoid fever, barely survives. And it's these sorts of things during the Revolution with very notable people, men and women, where it's instead of zigging, it could have zagged and ended up in a completely different direction, right? Paine survives, and we know what he ends up doing here. Let's hit that next slide. So Paine arrives in Philadelphia late November of 1774. Richard Bache, who is Franklin's son-in-law, introduces him to Robert Aitken. Should be a name that's familiar. He's a Philadelphia printer, right? Aitken has the Pennsylvania Magazine, which Paine helps to edit for the first 18 months of its existence. Paine writes poetry, different articles. This is his first big article written in the spring of 1775, his first published article, and it's titled African Slavery in America. I will tell you, almost nobody knows about this article because of common sense. The American Crisis Papers, the Rights of Man. This is gigantic. It's a very important article. Aitken, unfortunately, says to Paine, you know what? Not really my cup of tea, not who is, not the people I'm targeting to buy my paper. So he buries it at the end of the newspaper, which back then was, we know sometimes you've got a broadside or whatever it may be. The PA magazine was actually several pages long. It was literally on the last page. And Aitken says to Paine, you know what? If you want to stay employed, you got to tone it down a little bit. What the article discusses, it's spring of 75, as I said, and Paine is heavy anti-slavery. He, in fact, and not to give it away, after the Revolution, and I don't think I'm giving this away, we win, but after the Revolution, Paine says, I never would have supported the cause had I known slavery would survive. He's not the only one. Lafayette says it. Other notable men and, of course, women in the Revolution say that, saying, we're fighting for our freedom, but we can't grant it to others. So a bit of an anachronism, if you will. So by the Battle of Bunker Hill, so we're now June of 75, okay? Prop time. So what happens June 15 of 1775? George Washington is commander-in-chief. This is the commander-in-chief flag. Any chance I get to show one of my flags, I love it. Actually matches my coat. Go figure. So by Bunker Hill, Paine says, you know what? He's on the side of America needs to declare independence. So Lexington and Concord have happened. Bunker Hill has happened. The Americans have the British surrounded in Boston, right? You have the siege of Boston. So Paine goes on and he writes another article, and Aiken says, you know what? After your article on slavery, I cannot publish your next article. So Paine tenders it to the Pennsylvania Journal and the Weekly Advertiser. And this article that he writes, the slavery article, he does not sign his name, as many authors back then did not do, right? Think of John Dickinson when he writes Letters from a Pennsylvania Farmer, right? Or think of, when we jump ahead a little bit, Common Sense. It's actually titled anonymous, right? Nobody wants to give their name. At this time, Paine signs his name Justice and Humanity. He outlines pathways for emancipation now. He says, why wait? Let's do it now. Let's end this horrible practice, and then we can move forward with our own independence. So let's see here. Bear with me. We'll hit the next slide. And this article really does not gather much fanfare in the colonies. In contrast, Common Sense does. So Common Sense is published here in Philadelphia, July 9th, geez, seeing if you're listening, January 9th, 1776, right? You can still get it in the library today. It's less than 100 pages. It's really about 45 pages. It's a phenomenal read, even today. It is fantastic. And the basis of Common Sense is, why is a king a king? What makes a king more special than you or you or you? Because they were ordained by God, and this is where he starts to talk against religion a little bit more forcefully. But the timing could not be better. Within the first 3 months of Common Sense being published, 100,000 copies are out. By the end of the year, 500,000 copies have been published in a population of 2.5 million people. It's crazy. Common Sense is the second best seller of all time, behind, very good. I went to Catholic school and I got that wrong. So I'm sure that's reason like 847 that I'm at least going to purgatory, maybe somewhere a little bit warmer. I don't know. But the nuns are turning in their graves because I got that wrong. So the beauty of Common Sense, the writing, not actual common sense, is that Paine writes in a very down-to-earth manner. A lot of writings at the time, very lofty. People wanted to show how smart they were, right? Paine says, I want to write this so that the common man can read it, because that's who he needs to support the revolution, right? He thinks, okay, we've got some of the guys up in Massachusetts, or maybe some guys down in Virginia, but we need the yeoman farmer in Chester County, Pennsylvania. We need the farmer down in Fairfax County. We need, all these sorts of things. As a farmer, you are probably, at the time, you're probably working 14 hours, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, right? You have one day off, usually. Sunday, where do you go? Church. That's where Common Sense explodes, because this is what you get for sitting up front. And you pass it along, or you're discussing at a church and people say, oh my God, this is amazing. And that's how it catches on like wildfire. And again, it's the perfect time. If it's a year earlier, if it's before Lexington and Concord, might be a little bit more lukewarm of a reception, but it absolutely sets people on their ears, or rears. So 7 months after publication, the Second Continental Congress signs the Declaration of Independence. Quotes from Common Sense, and they're not here, but in the following pages, I offer nothing more than simple facts, plain arguments, and common sense. The cause of America is the cause of all mankind. The more men have to lose, the less they are willing to venture. Even the distance that the Almighty hath placed England and America is a strong and natural proof that the authority of the one over the other was never the design of heaven. Society in every state is a blessing, but government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil. Maybe something we can all agree on. Another talk, sorry. In its worst state, an intolerable one. We have it in our power to begin the world over again. That last line is over the copy of Common Sense at the Museum of the American Revolution. I was lucky enough to bring some friends from Pittsburgh to it, and I almost broke down. They were like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "Look at this, it's amazing." So just absolutely stunning stuff. So during the war, Paine serves as, and we can go to the next slide, Paine serves as an aide, right? The money from Common Sense, he donates to the American cause. So think of it. Growing up, poor family. Young adulthood, failure at everything. He has money in his hands. Where does he spend that money? He gives it to the cause. Because remember, at the time, you've got the Continental Congress, which really can't do anything. If only those days were, well, they still can't do anything. But they can't tax, they can't, right? So when George Washington asked for uniforms, asked for money, asked for food, asked for ammunition, the governors of New York, Pennsylvania, on and on say, I will help, but only if those items go to my men from New York or Pennsylvania. So the mindset is still not, we're all in this together, right? So Paine writes the American Crisis Papers, 16 of them. First one is read to the troops before they cross the Delaware on Christmas night. I also read the following, and don't hit the next slide yet. Well, it's like my best joke, which is all relative compared to the ones I've already told. But so just this first paragraph from American Crisis One, we've all heard it, but I read this, very special moment in my life. Quote, these are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country, but he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny like hell is not easily conquered, yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated, unquote. I read this to my wife when I proposed to her. At the tomb of the unknown, at the tomb of the unknown unknown Revolutionary War soldier, President's Day weekend, 2003, during a blizzard, and she said, yes, I'm still wearing the ring. So, and my mother-in-law to this day says, that wasn't very romantic. I said, well, it wasn't romantic to you. It was romantic to me. So, but again, Paine just seems to write the proper thing at the proper time. He taps into something. Of course, we know what happens during the 10 crucial days, right? Turns the tide of the war around. Then 1777 is pretty rough until Saratoga, Morristown, or not Morristown, Monmouth Courthouse in June of 1778, and then everything moves south, right? So here, I'll get my wife off the screen. She'd kill me if she saw that, but as I said, that's my best joke, so it's all downhill after this. Paine in 1777 is appointed by Congress to the Committee for Foreign Affairs. So basically diplomacy, right? Our greatest diplomat, Ben Franklin, all right? Not only does he think beer is good stuff, he is easily our best diplomat. Plays a huge role in bringing the French along. And of course, Saratoga is what puts it over the top, the victory at Saratoga, pardon me. Paine holds the post of secretary to the Committee for Foreign Affairs until early in 1779. He becomes embroiled in a controversy with Silas Deane, one of our other diplomats, whom Paine accuses of seeking to profit personally from French aid to the United States. When Paine is confronted by it, back then, when others are confronted by issues, and not just back then, many people will say, no, it wasn't me. Paine says, absolutely, I said it. Like, what you're doing is wrong. So Paine falls down a peg or two in the eyes of the Continental Congress because Dean is a well-respected member at that time. Paine is forced to quote from secret documents, which also knocks him down another peg. They say, how the heck do you know this? He says, well, I have these documents I really shouldn't have, right? So all of these things happen. Paine is let go from that post. What happens is he becomes clerk of the General Assembly of Pennsylvania in November of 1779. Okay, so action for the war has basically moved south at this point, right? In this capacity, he has frequent opportunities to observe American troops in the field and says, oh my God, what's going on here? He donates a large portion of his salary from this post to help the troops. Again, guy doesn't have two nickels to rub together, and he's giving his money away to the cause. In 1781, he accompanies John Laurens to France. Money, clothing, and ammunition they brought back from France helped to support basically the tail end of the revolution. Paine appeals to the separate states, saying, everybody, come on, jump in. We're near the end here. We need your help. Again, the mindset is, if I'm the Pennsylvania governor, I'll gladly help Pennsylvania troops. I don't think I could care less about Jersey, New York, whomever. Paine writes in 1780 an article called The Public Good. He includes a call for a national convention to remedy the Articles of Confederation, which are ineffective. Governors of states at the time love the Articles of Confederation because they have all the power under it. Continental Congress has none. It's not really until the Constitution itself where that power is taken away. States still have power under federalism, but not like they do under the Articles. At the end of the Revolution, Paine has no money. He's poverty-stricken. His writings had sold hundreds of thousands of copies. But he said, I don't want the profits. He said, print cheap editions so that John and Joan Q. Public can afford them and buy them and share them and read them. George Washington petitions Congress for money for Paine. Congress says, we're good. We're not going to help out. What happens is that Pennsylvania again gives him 500 pounds and says, here you go. The state of New York gives him a farm in New Rochelle. Seems crazy, but kind of a strange location. In New York, Paine starts to look at, so going back to Franklin, going back to Isaac Newton influences, he comes up with the idea for an iron bridge. First place he wants to put it, over the Schuylkill, basically around the area of the Girard Bridge now. But he's shot down. But his design is used later and enhanced as the Industrial Revolution kicks into place. Industrial Revolution here really doesn't start until about 1790. So when the nation's been founded. So that might be the one time Paine is a little bit ahead of the curve. If he waits 5 years, he'll be a rich man, right? Because people will take his design and build it left, right, up, and down. He works to aid the war effort in other ways. He returns to Great Britain in 1787. French Revolution starts to catch his attention, right? So he jumps on board with the French Revolution. In December of 1789, he publishes anonymously, shocker, a warning against the attempt of Prime Minister William Pitt to involve the British in a war with France over the Dutch Republic, reminding the British that war, quote, had but one thing certain, and that is an increase of taxes. We know it's taxes that bring on the revolution because of the debt that Great Britain assumes as a result of the French and Indian War. Of course, they're up to their eyeballs after the revolution. And then the French themselves go into massive debt supporting us during the revolution, which brings on their own revolution. So just almost like a circular firing squad here. Paine also, one of his other inventions didn't really take hold, a smokeless candle. So he's trying, but it's really the iron bridge without piers, which was his most notable. So we're going to hit that next slide, Stephen. Oh, wait, no, we're not. Sorry, we're on the right one. I'm sorry, jumped ahead. So the French Revolution is where Paine writes The Rights of Man. He writes The Age of Reason. And in The Rights of Man, which is published March of 1791, there are 8 separate editions that are published in 1791. So again, he's cranking them out, very popular. It's reprinted in the US here, where it's widely distributed by Jeffersonian societies. They support the French Revolution. Washington and the Federalists, Hamilton, Adams, those guys are saying, let these two fight it out. We'll kind of sit back. Whereas Jefferson and his Democratic Republican friends are saying we have to support the French. Edmund Burke replies when Paine writes The Rights of Man Part 2 in February of 1792. So in less than a year, he writes 2 volumes of The Rights of Man. What began as a defense of the French Revolution evolves into an analysis of the basic reasons for discontent in European society. And it all goes back to monarchy. You've got the haves and the have-nots, right? He's saying, those in Europe are actually jealous of the Americans because here in America, there's no caste system, kind of is, but you can be that farmer in Chester County and succeed, right? Success in France, success in England, success in Europe. Many people don't have a shot at it. Where they think their best shot of success is to join the military because they'll get 3 hots in a cot. Maybe they get promoted. If they do something great in battle, they'll be recognized, get some land, those sorts of things. But other than that, it's really limited, relatively speaking. So Paine talks about a bloody revolution that is forthcoming in France. So he is prescient. He sees what's coming at them. The French indict him for treason and say, this is not good. He is thrown in jail. He comes within a heartbeat of being guillotined. James Monroe saves him. James Monroe, who is minister to France at the time, saves him. Paine ends up hightailing it, smartly enough, back to America. He gets to America in about 1802. And here, Stephen, here's where we can go. So Paine, while he was in prison, just to put a bow on this, writes The Age of Reason in 1794. So 1791, 92, and 94 is when he writes Rights of Man 1, Rights of Man 2, Age of Reason. Age of Reason also has a second part written in 1796, and he rails against organized religion. Because what is he looking at? It's not so much the Quaker religion, right? The Society of Friends. He's looking at Anglicanism. He's looking at Catholicism in France and saying, these are the real causes of strife in those societies, right? So not well received. But Paine at this point is almost like, I don't care. This is how I feel. This is what I'm going to say. And he goes on and writes this. He writes, his last great pamphlet is written in 1797 under the title Agrarian Justice. And what it is talking about, again, inequality in property ownership. And think after the Revolutionary War, Congress can't pay soldiers. So how do they pay them? Hey, go out to the Ohio country and we'll give you some land. So he is writing against the impropriety of, hey, you're taking someone else's land, Native American lands, and giving them to these, and particularly, of course, if you're higher up the food chain, then you get more land. And he's saying that shouldn't be the case. Why is this person's sacrifice greater than this person's sacrifice, this other person's? So he runs into all sorts of issues again. Paine returns from France, as I said, late 1802, sails for the U.S. He gets here and people are like, who are you? Why are you here? We thought you were dead. Great way to say thank you very much for all he's done. He is an alcoholic at the time. So, and not to make light of it, but maybe he firmly believes in what Ben Franklin had said. He continues his attacks on privilege, on religious, what he calls superstitions. So he's not making friends with anybody at this point. He dies in New York City, and I believe it's Greenwich Village, in 1809. He's buried on his farm, which is right here, the white building, in New Rochelle. New York State actually had given it to him as a thank you for what he did during the Revolution. New York and what PA did during the Revolution are exceptions to the rule. Most of the colonies are like, you know what? We don't like how you have become such a, vitriolic writer about religion and society and these sorts of things. So at his death, or pardon me, 10 years after his death, he dies in 1809. In 1819, there's a writer, William Cobbett, who says, I'm going to take his bones from New Rochelle and get them back to where he was born in England. Problem is, the bones are lost at sea. So Thomas Paine is somewhere at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, right? It's never, and kind of I get the thought, but leave him where he is, I guess. So at Paine's death, you see quotes like this from the New York Citizen. He had lived long, did some good and much harm. Like, seriously? Unbelievable. It's not, and his rising from the ashes, if you will, his legacy doesn't start to jump forward until the centennial, till 1876, where people come to the realization of his contributions and what he has done. Think of Hamilton, right? So when Hamilton dies, he's seen as, all sorts of different things. Now, this is well before Lin-Manuel Miranda, but it's Hamilton's wife and then his son who push forward his legacy and say, this guy was an important guy. Same thing happens with Thomas Paine. It's not family members, but it's New York State and others who say, you know what? He's actually a really big deal. And it takes time for that to take hold. And it's really not until about a century ago in the 1920s where people have a real awakening to Thomas Paine. So I am going to stop right there. This is me again. Sorry. I have, and I'm going to leave them out. You're under no obligation because the information is here. But I have a business card. There's my email. There's my website. I've got throughout PA and New Jersey between now and mid-July about 50 talks set up. Libraries, historical societies, those sorts of things. They're all free. So if you're around and you want to pop in, great. After tonight, you may not, but that's fine. But truly, the other thing, my email, if you have a question, say, hey, what's a good book? Or I have a question about, or I gave a tour today and, I thought you might find this interesting. Anything along those lines, feel free to reach out. But again, thank you all for your attention. Appreciate the opportunity. Any questions, comments? I'm welcome. Yes, sir. Oh, here.
Two things.
Yes.
One, 1780, they claim he wrote that document against slavery with Judge Lewis at Strawberry Mansion, against one of the first documents to prevent slavery,
Right.
against slavery. You don't have 1780 for that.
No, it's 1775 is when it was written.
All right.
It's his first article.
I have that document.
Okay.
And two, my perspective of him was common sense was, why are we mad at England doing what they do when we're doing the same thing that they're doing over here in the United States? I mean, in the 13 colonies, we're still having slavery.
Right.
We have women don't have equal rights.
Right.
It's the same thing. The only thing we're not doing that England has, we're not going to have a king.
Right. So his biggest target was the monarchy. But as the revolution goes on, and his thought is women are going to get equal rights. Slavery is going to be ended with this revolution, with, as he says, our chance to start the world anew again. He's upset and very disappointed that does not happen. But his first target in common sense throughout is the monarchy, saying, why is King George better than you, better than me? Because he was ordained by God? That makes no sense. And then he uses, as he says, common sense to describe even, and it's there's some sarcasm in it, but he's saying, why did God put an ocean between us and England if England was supposed to rule us, right? Which is ironic because of his stance on religion. But yeah, he does speak of these other things and that you're talking about in Common Sense. And my interpretation, which with $1 will get you a soda downstairs. All right. But he's planting the seeds with the population and actually with the Continental Congress about emancipation, about women's rights, saying, hey, if I can throw these things in there, it's fodder for discussion. But truly the biggest the biggest target is the king. Good question, though.
I read that in, I guess, the federal period, he became very critical. He became very critical of Washington.
Right.
Was that because he railed against Washington not taking action against slavery?
Yes, primarily. And Lafayette does the same thing. Lafayette and Washington, Washington sees Lafayette as a son. Have any of you been down to Mount Vernon? You see what's hanging in the foyer? The key to the Bastille. George Washington does not have a lot of adornments in his house. That is prominent. If the thing was alive, it would attack you as soon as you walk into Mount Vernon. But it hurt Lafayette, similar to it does Thomas Paine and others. John Adams is the only founder who doesn't have slaves. And he's trying to say to these other guys, what are we doing? Like, this is our shot. And even when Abigail says to him, remember the ladies, and he kind of poo-poos it, but her thought too is, this is a once in a lifetime shot. Nobody has had this opportunity to remake the world as it should be remade. But yeah, it's primarily because of slavery. Right, exactly. And they also think that the founders think when the Constitution is ratified in 1789, and it's written into the Constitution, that by about 1807, their thought is slavery is going to be dead. Of course, what makes slavery survive? The biggest thing, invention of the cotton gin in 1793 on, of all people's farms, Nathaniel Greene's down in Georgia, right? Yeah, Eli Whitney was a Yale student working on Greene's farm. Greene had died of heat stroke a couple of years earlier. He's down there with Greene's widow, invents this, and I take it from the Ken Burns series, The Civil War, where I think it's Shelby Foote who says, before the cotton gin, it would take a slave 10 hours a day to pick a pound of lint out of cotton. After the cotton gin, they're cranking out 1,000 pounds a day. And ironically enough, where's most of that cotton coming? Right here. Philadelphia, from the founding of the nation until World War II, is the largest textile producing area in the world. Exactly. So good question.
Was there a connection with Benjamin Rush getting together with Thomas Paine and Common Sense in that whole time period there?
I think there's a tangential one. And the other thing, and I think this is where Rush and Paine are similar. Rush also had his issues with Washington. There are letters, and there's a great book about Rush, and I forget the title. It's probably 4 or 5 years old. Read it. Fascinating guy. That may be it, where it talks about how Rush writes letters saying that Washington isn't the guy to lead us. Of course, Washington gets wind of it and says, what in the heck are you talking about? And Rush says, hamana, hamana, hamana. I didn't write those letters. And Washington shows him and he says, oh, okay, maybe I wrote those letters. But Rush has similar disappointment. So yeah, I think their paths absolutely cross here. There aren't, there isn't the major connection as there is, say, with Franklin or with, Washington. But Paine being here when the Continental Congress is happening and first landing here when everything is coming together, that's also when Rush, Rush is such a big name as well, sometimes forgotten because of all the other luminaries, right, that he is with in the Continental Congress. So long answer, and I'm sorry, this is also the byproduct of being the ninth of 11, I don't give short answers because I didn't get to talk growing up. But yeah, I think, Vince, there is a connection between them, and their paths absolutely cross. But nothing of note, as you know, that I'm aware of. Somebody here may weigh in, like he had with Franklin.
Just a comment and a question.
Sure.
Do you think, I think Paine was one of the greatest writers ever. I was a copywriter for years. He was extraordinary, but he also was a Paine.
Right.
Do you think that personality is what, I mean, I think there were 4 people at his funeral. Did
Correct.
that contribute to his descent?
Absolutely does. And that's why you have the quote, you know, he had lived long, done some good and much harm. And I agree with you. I think he's a fascinating writer. Any of those articles or books that he has written, great reads. Even today, I mean, there's a connection to today in what he's talking about back then. But yeah, he ruffled a lot of feathers. I would say, and again, my humble opinion, after John Adams, Thomas Paine is probably right there with needling people, and because he's really going after societal norms, right? And again, his thought, not to sound like a broken record, is there aren't a lot of opportunities. What we're doing, pardon the pun, is revolutionary, right? We are going to be, if this thing survives, we're going to be the first one in history to really do this. Why do it in a half measure? Let's go for broke and do it, because the only people who are going to stop us are us. It's not going to be the French. It's not going to be the Dutch or the Spanish. It's going to be us. So yes, that's a very good point. And I agree with you. I think it's a great writer.
Wasn't it scurvy that he was almost died from on his first trip?
It was typhoid he had, but no, and that scurvy is also, yeah, scurvy also takes out, because during the voyage, right, you're not getting nutrition. Any food that's on the voyage is rotting and those sorts of things. So typhoid is what I had read.
And also, do you go over his house, which is like 3 blocks down the street from here, Thomas Paine Place, right off of 3rd Street?
Right.
And Thomas Paine Place.
Right. I
here in
have.
Philadelphia.
I have. You know, it's great. I love it. And this entire area, and again, to the point of, think of where we are, you know, not to denigrate it, what sucks out a lot of the oxygen around here? It's Independence Hall, it's, you know, but Carpenter's Hall, phenomenal. The Paine House, phenomenal. You know, there are statues. When I gave a tour to my friends from Pittsburgh back in January, we walked by, just as an example, the statue of Robert Morris. They said, "Who is that?" And I said, "Isn't there Robert Morris University out, kind of sort of out your way?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's right." But truly, it just kind of gets lost in the sauce of everything else that happens here. It's like going up to Boston, right? You want to see Bunker Hill, you want to go to Lexington and Concord, see the Boston Massacre site, but there's so many other smaller things, and not to say the Paine House is a small thing, but it all plays a role. It's not one action or one silver bullet that leads us there. It's a combination of stuff. It's the synergy of all these things coming together. My understanding is it was Aiken who did. Yeah, that absolutely. Yes. 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 Yeah. Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. Correct. No, which is, I mean, wild, right?
So do you have any involvement in the movement to get the statue of Thomas Paine in DC, or how do you feel about the renovation of Thomas Paine Plaza here?
So I wish I had more juice than I do. You know, the loudest thing on me is probably my jacket, maybe my voice. But no, I think it's long overdue. And not to open up this can of worms, but you know, to see what happened at the president's house recently, my thought is our history is good, bad, leave it all out. You can't just show the good stuff, right? Yeah. Because it all is how we are here today. Although a lot of it isn't great, there's a reason we are where we are today, and it's because of these other things that have happened. So my hope is that he gets recognized. And my real hope was, even though the funding's been approved, you would think with 2026, they'd say, all right, let's finally get this done.
Yeah, same,
particularly the Paine statue. Just, it's depressing.
yeah, same thing with the Adams Memorial and others.
Right.
Others. And just one final question. You said that the bones were lost at sea.
Yes.
Where and how did that happen?
So it's when this gentleman exhumes Paine's bones and he says, you know what? Is there anyone from New Rochelle here? Okay, good. He shouldn't be buried in New Rochelle, which is where his farm was. He should be buried back where he was born. So they exhume the bones to bring him back, and they say they're lost at sea. They're not exactly sure where. It's somewhere in the Atlantic. I'm sure people have tried to find them, but
So
who
it was like a
knows?
shipwreck or
Right. No, it was, yeah, a ship had gone down with them.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Take one or two more questions and then we'll wrap it up.
I get it. So he was single. He was always single? Did that perhaps play?
So he had some failed marriages early, and his wife was understandably upset because he was such a failure at everything. And her push was, your father was a staymaker. Yeah, he didn't make a ton of money. Stick with that. And Paine was almost like the next shiny object, right? So he was like, I'm going to be a privateer. I'm going to be a customs officer. And he was bad at all of them.
Okay.
Yeah. So he had failed marriages. Right.
Okay. The other thing the observation I have about the various things he felt so strongly about, and even with religion, the religions he was targeting were ones with, religious doctrine.
Right.
And he had this Quaker side. He sounds like a really activist Quaker to me. But the Quakers, by this time, were very unpopular in the
Correct.
right?
Right.
And even the Quakers that still existed were kind of full of themselves.
Right.
And some super rich and had those kinds of problems. And
Sure.
Slaves, etc. But I'm very struck by the things he really targeted were the same kinds of things that many Quakers felt very strongly about.
Right.
But kind of a generation before.
Absolutely.
Anthony Benezet, those.
Correct. And he talks about superstitions and those sorts of things as a way to, denigrate. And to your point, he doesn't really take a shot at Quakerism, but some of the things he talks about, you can connect the dots. Yes, sir.
Yeah, there is a receipt that's been uncovered regarding John Adams having purchased a person.
Okay.
So that's kind of new news. It is available at the Philosophical Society.
Okay. I didn't know that. Yeah. In my research, they said it was.
I don't think many people do know it.
Okay.
because
No, that's
I
great.
thought I'd open up. But the next question, the real question I have for you is that I'm fascinated by this Ben Franklin meeting Tom Paine and sending him over here with a letter of recommendation. Was that all it took?
Well,
Did Franklin finance him? Did
so
Franklin set him?
Franklin gave him some money to pay for the trip. And
Okay.
if I didn't mention that, I'm sorry. Franklin at that point is retired, right? Because
Right.
he's such a his printing shop is still going and it's cranking out money. His experiments and his inventions, although he doesn't patent them, right? Because he wants people to be able to enjoy them and use them. But yeah, Paine searches out Franklin in London, knowing that if there's one guy to get a letter of introduction from, it's Ben Franklin.
And does Ben Franklin know who Paine is, or does Paine introduce himself?
So Paine introduces himself, and Franklin is fascinated by him because Paine starts to talk about his ideas of government, religion, those sorts of things. And we know Franklin wasn't a very religious guy, right? But he and Paine just hit it off. And that's where, Paine says, woe is me. I've been a failure. I've been divorced. And Franklin says, go to Pennsylvania. I'll support you.
So my question follows up that.
Yes.
After that, did he maintain a relationship with Franklin
Yes.
throughout
Throughout. And we know Franklin dies, right?
1790?
Right.
But could you characterize what their interaction might have been?
So because Paine is involved, and think of, so when the revolution takes off, where's Franklin? France.
Right.
So they have a relationship, but most of Paine's time is here. Paine doesn't go back over to France until the French Revolution is kicking in, and Franklin's gone by that point.
They're exchanging letters.
They're yeah. I mean, there's a cordial relationship. And the other thing, Paine will say, well, you know, I'm tight with Ben Franklin. You know, that opens a few doors for him as well. So, and helps with the Continental Congress before they turn on him with the Silas Deane affair.
Thanks.
So you're welcome.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you all. Really appreciate it. My pleasure. Oh, yeah, I did it. I'm sorry. 5 seconds.
One.
So this, when I was talking about the 10 crucial days, this is, thank you. This is the Battle of White Plains flag. Battle of White Plains took place in September of 1776. The Americans lost. The Hessians captured, not this flag, but this flag was carried at the Battle of White Plains. The Hessians capture it, make fun of the Americans. Guess who captures it back in December in Trent? The Americans from the Hessians. They bring it back. Real quickly, this is, so of course the sword at the top here, a liberty cap. Right. Okay, which goes back to Roman times when a slave was freed, they wore the red cap. You see in portraits, thanks, of famous Revolutionary War personalities after the war. Absolutely. They're wearing, in the portrait, they're wearing a liberty cap. So it goes back to that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, before we go, thank you very much, Jim. Before we go, I want to give out the certificates and the pins to those who passed the certificate, the exam. Thank you, certification. Okay, so those who come up, would you stay here because we need to get a picture, please? So Jill Bryan. Jill Combs. Thank you. Heather Dooley. Maggie Hayes. Okay. Christopher Malazzi, if I pronounced that incorrectly, I'm sorry. Thank you. Oh. Thank you. Elizabeth McMorris. Woo. Brian O'Leary. Thank you. Mark Raspanti. And Malcolm Stanley, whom I didn't see either. So congratulations to all of these who passed the exam, and I'm going to take a picture. Quick picture. You got it? All right, that concludes our, oh, you want to say something? Yeah. Okay, so Tish has a few words to say, and then we will be done, unless anybody has anything else.
I just wanted to make a comment about Del Connor, who was one of the founding members of our organization, and he did a lot of work for it. He passed away. He was also a curator and lived in the Physic House, and he was, of course, a descendant of Dr. Physic and Commodore Connor and many other people. So he was buried, and wonderful thing is, Christchurch buried him. He's the only person ever recently buried in ashes with his ancestors, by Dr. Physic and the Connors, etc. So he was very active with us, and it was a graphic designer and many other things. So I have a few of these, if any of you know, or I think we should put it archivally if we have in archives, just to remember Dell. And there's some seeds, packets of memory over there, if you want to take them and plant them in your gardens in his memory. Dell Connor. Dell Connor. So I have a few of these brochures. Yeah, you would recognize him if you see him. Right. Yeah. Cancer. Yeah.